What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my Friday Night SmackDown audio review for February 9th, 2024. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well and having a great weekend so far. A very worthy follow-up edition, I thought, of SmackDown following that great press conference on Thursday. The overall press conference itself was not overly eventful with, Bianca showing up and, Becky and Rhea going face-to-face was cool. Obviously, what got everyone talking was the face-to-face and the angle they shot at the end of that press conference with Rock, Roman, Rhodes, and Rollins. All people with our last names, apparently, which makes it very confusing talking about the situation. But I went into great detail about it on Wrestle Rant Radio yesterday with RJ, another R-named individual. We had a great time breaking it down, where they're going with it, if they can make it into a triple threat, why they shouldn't make it into a triple threat at WrestleMania with Rock, Roman, and Rhodes, where Rollins factors into all of this. None of those people were on this show. Rollins is a Raw guy, but that didn't stop, Drew McIntyre from appearing on the show, and Sami Zayn, and qualifiers, which I'll get to. But Cody was not on the show, another Raw guy. No Rock, no Roman. They will be on the show next week. Who we did get on the show this week, opening the episode, is Triple H. Now, he was advertised earlier in the day, and people were wondering what he would have in store. What would he say? He was addressing the audience. Would it be a whole lot of nothing? I mean, nothing really eventful happened from what he said. The GMs were also there, Nick Aldis and Adam Pearce, and they announced some pretty significant stuff relating to Elimination Chamber. Triple H did make it very clear here, to open up the episode, we'll get right into it, that he was the boss. He's the man in charge. He reasserted his authority here, no pun intended, with the promo he cut addressing Rock and Roman, and the way they acted at the press conference, which I thought was really interesting, because one of the things we discussed in our review of the press conference on Wrestle Rant Radio was the idea of a potential power struggle between Rock and Triple H on the show. Now, we've had the authority on the show before. We don't need Triple H bringing back the authority, but kind of playing into the idea that Rock's on the board, that Big E even mentioned, which I thought he was kind of not giving away, not saying anything they scripted for him. He was probably just going off the top of his head, bringing up the idea, oh yeah, Rock's on the board, maybe that has something to do with it in storyline, blah, blah, blah. I appreciated that fresh aspect of it, that panel they had at the press conference with Big E and Punk, Cole and McAfee. I enjoyed all of that, but that could be one direction they're going in. No, not a Triple H Rock match. I can't believe I saw people pitching that on Twitter last night. Triple H cannot wrestle. Not out of any reason that he doesn't want to. Honestly, if he could, we probably would get that match, to be perfectly honest with you. We're not getting that match because the guy could probably die from having another match. He has a pacemaker in, and he has for the last couple of years. So, that match is not happening. I don't need to see the match. Maybe 10 years ago when they were teasing it for WrestleMania 31 or WrestleMania 32. We never got it. Doesn't really bother me. Whatever. But they can have on-air segments on the shows where Triple H is telling Rock, listen, I know you're on the board, but I'm the one running the ship here. And maybe Triple H is a surrogate, like a Rollins or something. I don't think we're obviously not getting Rollins and Rock at WrestleMania. It was also determined in this segment, speaking of WrestleMania and Rollins, that Rollins' World Heavyweight Championship challenger would be determined in an Elimination Chamber match with 6 people from Raw, 6 people from SmackDown. I had to do the math in my head for a second, determining, competing in qualifiers to determine who will face Rollins at Mania for the title. So it was all this, and it was weird seeing all this and Pearce work together here. And I know they were discussing the idea of Elimination Chamber and how they're going to work together for this pay-per-view a week ago. They were talking about that on SmackDown and on Raw and whatnot last week. But these two GMs were at each other's throats, literally like 2 weeks ago, right before the Royal Rumble. So for them to kind of do the exact opposite and be a united front, as Nick Aldis said, I thought was a little weird, but whatever. So the qualifiers will include, including on the show, which I'll get to in a second, Drew McIntyre and AJ Styles. And yes, it is combining Raw and SmackDown superstars. Punk was going to be in this thing and probably win the whole thing. Who he would have replaced, I don't know. Even if Punk was in it, they probably still would have had SmackDown superstars in the chamber. Just because to add more star power, Gunther can't be at Chamber. I mean, that wasn't really anything new. They probably already knew that. I don't think we're getting Gunther and Jey Uso at the pay-per-view because Gunther, from what I understand that we found out in October, cannot leave the country for 6 months upon getting his citizenship in the U.S. So I think that match will probably happen on Raw if I had to take a guess. Gunther will not be fighting Rollins at WrestleMania for the World Heavyweight Championship. I thought they were going in that direction. I wanted them to go in that direction. It's fine that they're not, provided they are going with McIntyre instead. But again, we got McIntyre and Styles on the show. We got Randy Orton and Sami Zayn on the show. Coming up on Monday, it's going to be, or on SmackDown next week, I know it's Kevin Owens and Dominic Mysterio. Logan Paul will wrestle his first televised match for WWE, not including pay-per-view, like his first SmackDown live match, or Raw. He's never wrestled on either show yet. And he's the United States champion, so it's nice they're actually finally doing that, and they're advertising it a week out. It's going to be Logan Paul and The Miz running it back from SummerSlam 02. Which makes me think, I don't know if they would have done this, but when I'm looking at this lineup and I'm thinking, this couldn't have been set in stone, because Dominic was also apparently, reportedly, not supposed to be in this match. He reportedly was supposed to face Brock Lesnar. So again, maybe the idea of including SmackDown, and Dominic's a Raw guy anyway, maybe including SmackDown people was a new thing. I don't know. But I'm thinking, like, looking at the lineup, who would Punk have been in there instead of? Like, is Miz really going to beat Logan Paul and go on to Chamber? Like, I'll get into that at the end, I guess, after we wrap up this review. But I'm thinking Punk would have been in there. Would we have gotten Punk and Logan Paul on TV before WrestleMania? Probably not. I mean, that's a potential feud for down the road. Miz is fine, because we've seen the match before. Miz isn't that big of a name compared to the other people in this match. That's fine. But we're getting that on SmackDown next week. On Raw on Monday, it's LA Knight and Ivar in a qualifier. And what was the other one? Bobby Lashley and Bronson Reed. And Bronson Reed's got to win that. But we'll talk more about who should win and who should qualify a little bit later on. So this was a complete 180 after the awful ending to SmackDown last week. The segment itself was whatever. Everything up until Rock coming out I thought was fine. But then they pivoted. And yes, they did indeed pivot. They definitely did not intend on that being the original plan. Anyone claiming that it was the original plan, they were always planning on adding Rhodes. No, they definitely were not. Because they still need to explain and have yet to explain why Cody would willingly go out there and give up his Mania spot to The Rock. I know he said he had a conversation with him. He even alluded to that in the press conference. But still, facing Roman at WrestleMania meant everything to him. So why would he step aside and then come back 6 days later at that press conference and say, well, I will fight you at WrestleMania? It makes no sense. I'm glad they're doing the right thing, don't get me wrong. I will give them credit for pivoting. But I don't give them credit for fucking this up in the first place and making it more convoluted than it needs to be. So I thought that was just dumb. But anyway, this was a much better start to SmackDown than what ended SmackDown last week. I will say that much. Our first qualifier, Drew McIntyre and AJ Styles one-on-one. I think this marked the first time we've seen these two one-on-one, I want to say since early 2021, in about 3 years. Interestingly, they were the two that closed out the WWE Championship Elimination Chamber match 3 years ago that McIntyre won to retain the title before Miz cashed in, became WWE Champion that night. So, they have history. They actually had a one-on-one match at I thought it turned into a triple threat with Miz, and I think it did. But it started as a singles match. A TLC match at TLC 2020, I think, between Styles and McIntyre, and that was a really good match too. Up until Miz came out. Miz did not cash in the contract that night. I think they had him get involved, but the contract was rescinded. It was weird. But anyway, so they have history. McIntyre won here after LA Knight was at ringside, kind of busting AJ's balls. He stepped on the ring apron and pretty much inadvertently cost AJ the match. So they're clearly still feuding, which I like. I don't really need to see LA Knight lose to Ivar, although Ivar isn't like a loser, but he's not as big of a name as LA Knight or Styles or Orton. Ivar being in the chamber is fine. It's the idea of Dominic and Miz both being in the chamber. It's all right, are we really going to have B+ level players? And I like Dominic, I like Miz, but those are not main event guys that would realistically win the chamber. Are we really going to have them qualify over Logan Paul and Kevin Owens, which they might have to if Logan Paul and Kevin Owens have a match of their own at the pay-per-view, which again we'll get into at the end of this review. But McIntyre qualifying makes the most sense. AJ and LA Knight should have a match of their own at Elimination Chamber. I thought that even before the Royal Rumble, because I knew they were not winning that four-way for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. So they should finish off their feud at Elimination Chamber before LA Knight, hopefully, ideally, goes on to Mania to challenge Logan Paul for the United States Championship. But the crowd did boo when LA Knight cost AJ the match. AJ's not a full-on heel yet. He's kind of more of a tweener, and he has been since he came back 3 months ago. So the crowd wasn't really happy with that, but McIntyre winning was the right call. He also interrupted Triple H before this match started. McIntyre is just on another level right now, so I do hope we get McIntyre and Rollins at Mania. Yes, it's a match we've seen a few times already. We've already seen it twice in recent months. Rollins won both times, but third time's the charm for McIntyre. He can win the title, hopefully, fingers crossed, in front of a big crowd. Maybe they give the match a stipulation. That would be nice. So, I don't know if Priest would cash in. It's very possible that he does, but I would rather just see McIntyre walk out the new World Heavyweight Champion. I mean, the guy deserved it after all the great work that he's done in the last 6 months alone. But really, he deserves it dating back to 2020 when he had his moment taken away because of COVID. He did win the title at Mania 36, but not in front of fans. So it would be a nice 180 all these years later for him to win the title at WrestleMania, this time as a heel. I think that'd be pretty cool. But really good stuff here is expected from McIntyre and AJ. We had another Chamber qualifier, this time for the women. So we found out earlier this week it's going to be Nia Jax and Rhea Ripley for the Women's World Championship at Elimination Chamber. And that we found out last week it's going to be Bayley and Io Sky for the WWE Women's Championship at WrestleMania. So that leaves Rhea Ripley, and let's face it, it will be Rhea Ripley walking into WrestleMania as the champion without an opponent for WrestleMania. I had batted around the idea of Rhea defending in a Mania 24-esque triple threat with Liv and Becky. Becky being the Triple H equivalent, Liv being the John Cena equivalent, having a previous history with, Becky has a previous history with Rhea too. They've been building to this for a while. But, Becky has history with Rhea Ripley. Liv Morgan more so has history with Rhea, with her putting her on the shelf, which is what Orton did to Cena back in 07. And then Rhea's been champion for a while, which is what Orton had been back in 07, 08. And then that way you could have Rhea retain and build the separate singles matches with both women after that. They're not doing that unless Liv and Becky, and I assume Liv qualifies on Monday against Zoe Stark, unless they end this thing in a draw, which would be a little, nothing's stopping them from doing that, which I guess they could, which would be a little lame. I think Becky just wins the whole thing. I do want to live in that match in Mania, but I don't see it happening. But anyway, so we have Liv taking on Zoe Stark on Monday. There was another match on Monday that they're doing. I don't remember the rest of the women's qualifiers. I know Naomi's in a match on SmackDown next week with Zelina Vega. And Tiffany Stratton's in a qualifier with, I don't remember, but I think Tiffany will qualify. I think Naomi will qualify. So yeah, we're having another instance of SmackDown people being in a match for a Raw title. At this point, it's Mania. Who gives a shit? Cody Rhodes is a Raw guy challenging a SmackDown guy, so at this point, nothing is off the table. It's whatever. The brand split doesn't really matter much these days anyway, so it really doesn't matter. It doesn't really bother me. I'm not really fully in favor of it, but it is what it is. So, I don't think a SmackDown person will win anyway. I think it will be Becky Lynch from Raw, so it is what it is. Bianca beat Michin here, and these two have history dating back to NXT. They had a good competitive match. Good stuff here from these two. The outcome was never in doubt, but I like that Michin was made to look credible in defeat, so I appreciated that. So we got Bianca and Becky in there so far, which is sick. I think Liv will be added, Tiffany, Naomi, and then another woman from Raw. Again, they're doing another qualifier on Monday's Raw. I forgot who it's with, though. I don't remember off the top of my head. It might be a Raw versus SmackDown case. It might be Raw versus Raw. I don't know. Because Becky and Shayna was Raw versus Raw. Liv and Zoe is Raw versus Raw. So they're not all Raw versus SmackDown matches the same way the men's match is. But yeah, that's what I would do. I would have Becky win the whole thing, but I like the idea of adding qualifiers and making these matches mean more. Going into Elimination Chamber and WrestleMania. Stakes, and more stakes. You love to see it. Speaking of the women and Bayley and whatnot, Bayley was out there to address the audience and her, reasoning for turning on Damage Control and knowing that they were going to turn on her. I thought she had some really, made some really good points here and kind of saying that, they didn't know if the crowd would be on her side because she's treated them so poorly in recent years. And, she wasn't really sure, thinking that the fans would think that she deserved the beatdown that she got from Damage Control last week on SmackDown. They did chant, I think you deserve it, but in a positive way, and they chanted Bayley's name. So she was very over in front of this crowd, as I assume she will continue to be going into WrestleMania. they got the desired reaction for Bayley. And what I like about this whole Bayley character shift going into Mania is the fact that we've seen, this organic change of character for her. It's not forced. It's not coming out of nowhere. The segment on SmackDown last week was certainly abrupt, but that's only because they had to announce the match for Mania, to announce the chamber matches, which is why I get what they did. But, it's still organic and people are behind her, which is cool to see. That being said, I like how they're going to kill time. Not the entire time, but at least a couple weeks, a month, or whatever, with teasing the story. And they definitely did what they did on purpose last week, with Dakota Kai not being there. Because she's always there. Last week was the one week that she was not there for a Damage Control segment since, SummerSlam. And she came out here, interrupted Bayley, and said, listen, I wasn't in favor of that. I wasn't clued in on that. I was away last week, as I'm very close to being cleared. And, I didn't have anything to do with that. And Bayley said, bullshit, you were there laughing with them every time I went backstage. Bayley was not a dumb babyface and did not immediately buy into it. They were kind of on the same page and fending off Damage Control to close out the segment. Dakota Kai, she fended them off with a chair, but she never actually connected with any of the women. So I like the idea that they're teasing that they're back on the same page. Maybe they will be. With Sasha Banks going to AEW, and they don't really have, Sasha and Naomi would have been the perfect backup for Bayley in WWE. But Mercedes is AEW bound, so that's not happening. They could still incorporate, and I think they will, incorporate Naomi into this thing, and that would be sick. But they need another woman. Now, could they add Bianca? Yeah, maybe, but Bianca and Damage Control, I'm fucking done with it, so hopefully not. Although it would make sense from a storyline standpoint. Although she also should not trust Bayley. That should also take some time to tell that story, too. Dakota Kai being a babyface on their side would be fine, but I also see her probably being more of a mouthpiece for Sky, Sane, and Asuka. So I think this will lead to her turning on Bayley. You can't trust this woman. She fucking turned on Tegan Nox 5 years ago. How could you trust Dakota Kai? She also turned on Raquel Rodriguez. So she's like the Kevin Owens of the women's division. You cannot trust Dakota Kai. But yeah, that's where I think this is going, and I like the fact they're doing that to kind of kill more time before WrestleMania. So I like that a lot. And maybe at some point we can get Bayley and Dakota Kai before Mania, depending on when she's cleared, which hopefully will be before WrestleMania. I think it'd be a great match to do in Perth, in Australia, but that show's in 2 weeks, and I don't know if she'll be cleared. Maybe she might be already cleared, we don't know. But if she's cleared before, then that would be a nice match to do at Elimination Chamber. We had another number one contenders match, another match with stakes on the show, not pertaining to Elimination. It did have to do with Elimination Chamber, but not the Elimination Chamber matches themselves. The winners of this tag team match earning an undisputed WWE Tag Team title opportunity at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view against Judgment Day. Tyler Bate and Pete Dunne versus DIY. A really good match here. Did not reach the level that I thought they could, and not the match I think they're completely capable of, but still a very fun match. The crowd started out quiet. Neither teams were really all that over right now, but they got more and more into the action as it progressed. Bate and Dunne. Overall, not even overall, what am I saying? In the end, reigning supreme, earning the title shot at Elimination Chamber, and it will be Bate and Dunne versus Judgment Day, which is cool. It's a fresh match. I don't think Bate and Dunne win, obviously. I don't know if Bate and Dunne are here to stay in the tag team division. I'd be fine if they weren't. I'd be fine if they used this as another step towards turning Dunne heel and turning him on Tyler Bate. That's obviously the end game. It might not be imminent, so I'm not expecting it come that show. We're not getting Bate and Dunne at WrestleMania. That'd be cool, but that's not happening. That's not a priority for them. That would probably end up on the fucking pre-show, if anything, at best. Maybe WrestleMania Friday. And WrestleMania SmackDown or whatever. So I don't think we're getting that, but we are getting the tag team title match in Elimination Chamber, and that should be a great match too, before I would assume Judgment Day defends against Awesome Truth at WrestleMania, which is the match that, to me, that makes the most sense. So really good stuff there. And just like that, we got to the main event. The show completely breezed by. We got to Orton and Sami Zayn in a qualifier for the Men's World Heavyweight Championship number one contenders Elimination Chamber match. Randy Orton beating Zayn here, and it was realistic to think that Zayn could pull out the upset victory. He is the ultimate underdog after all. He could not here, but he did come close. They had a really, really good match, teasing that Orton had a hurt back. He did the superplex. I like the fact they made a big deal of him bringing back the superplex. Probably legitimately not a good idea to be doing that move all the time, because Orton's back is fucked from the surgery and shit. He has a injury of back injuries and whatnot. Has a history of back injuries, that is. But, I thought it was cool that he busted it out for this match. He was that desperate to put away Sami. They were telling that story. And aside from one, obvious moonsault botch in the outside that was not good, I thought this was overall a really, really good main event. And Orton went over here in clean fashion. And they're telling the story that Zayn does not have a clear path to WrestleMania. Now, I think he should be at WrestleMania. Now, I know not everyone will end up on the Mania card. There are people that inevitably get left off. This has happened in the years past, and that was when the roster was not nearly as deep or as stacked as it is right now, specifically for the men. So, there are going to be people that are left off the show. I get that. They're probably going to compete in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, whatever. But for Sami Zayn specifically, to not have, and even Orton, I don't know what he does in Mania either at this point, for Sami Zayn specifically to not have a Mania match, to me is egregious after he headlined the show a year ago. He's not hurt. He's still very much over. So I think you find a match, you find something for him to do. Someone, brought up the possibility on Twitter. What if he, were to team with Owens against Grayson Waller and Austin Theory at the show? Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's fun. That feels more like a SmackDown match, but, that's a possibility. I don't know what Owens does at Mania either. Like with Orton, I really do not want to see Orton in Solo at this point. I was on board with that a couple months ago, even like a month or so ago, but then he beat Solo in like fucking 5 minutes a couple weeks ago on SmackDown. Clean. Like, clean as a sheet. And the match was anticlimactic. Solo has not been protected at all since he beat John Cena. I don't think Solo has won a single fucking match on TV since he beat John Cena back at Crown Jewel in November. Why would I want to see Solo in a singles match at Mania at this point? I don't. So I'd rather see Orton face like a newly turned Kevin Owens. Again, that doesn't solve the Sami Zayn issue. I'm just kind of throwing around ideas here as far as like what Orton can do as well. But I like this match. This is another match we haven't seen in quite a while. I think they had maybe one TV match, did Orton and Sami, back in 2017 on SmackDown in December. They just actually uploaded the full match to their YouTube channel like a month ago. So I thought that was cool that they rekindled that rivalry here for one night. Not that they acknowledged that, but really good match. And I'm curious to see what they do with Sami. I'm looking forward to the Chamber. We had Orton and McIntyre facing off to close out the show. Someone said to me, it's pretty clear they're doing McIntyre and Orton in WrestleMania. I mean, at Mania, that makes absolutely no sense. I mean, I know that would be a reversal of the roles with Orton as the babyface, McIntyre as the heel. They work well together, sure. McIntyre should win that whole fucking thing. With Orton, I don't know what you do. With Sami, I don't know what you do. I thought we might get McIntyre and Sami at Mania, and we still might, because he brought up again here in the backstage interview earlier in the episode, I've never beaten McIntyre before. So they could still go back to that at some point. Maybe McIntyre wins the title, and then Sami beats him for the championship at some point. I don't know. I mean, that's a possibility. I thought it might be Gunther, but, who knows? So I don't really know what you do with those guys, but I think McIntyre wins the whole Chamber match. He and Orton faced off to close at the show, like I said. And the rest of the match, I don't really know who else you have fill out these brackets. That's the problem. Ivar being in there is fine, because, he's a bigger guy. He's not going to win, but he can be like, the dark horse or whatever. He's not the dark horse to win, but like the guy that's in there lasting a while, benefits from facing off with some bigger stars, whatever. But the problem is the rest of this match might not be big stars. Because you look at the field here, Ivar should beat Knight to set up Styles and Knight for Elimination Chamber. Knight could be in the match, but he's not going to fucking win. So I don't want him to lose either. I think Knight needs to pick up a big win on pay-per-view, and it should be against, AJ Styles needs to win too, but he's a stepping stone at this point. He's whatever. And I like AJ, but I think Knight's a bigger priority. I don't think Knight should be in the Chamber. So Ivar should qualify. Bronson and Bobby, Bronson's from Australia. The problem with Bronson being in there is that he kind of fills the same role that Ivar does. That's kind of the problem. He's not winning either. He should be in the match. I'd rather see Bronson in there than Ivar. But, I don't know. I would like to see Bronson in there, maybe carrying cross interferes, I don't know. And why would AJ also not cost Knight his match after Knight cost him his qualifier in this show? Another thing that's worth asking. For the other two qualifiers, Logan Paul losing to The Miz would be fucking ridiculous. But that's the thing. I don't think Owens and Logan Paul are still technically feuding. We were supposed to find out on the show who was next for Logan Paul, and I guess we did. But I thought it was to find out who was next to challenge him for the United States Championship. We didn't find that out. Because I thought we were getting Logan Paul and Kevin Owens at the pay-per-view. I really don't want that match at Mania. I really want it to be LA Knight and Logan Paul, because if LA Knight's not facing Logan Paul, I don't really know what you do with him at Mania. It could be him and AJ, but like in a rematch or something, but I don't know. I really want LA Knight to walk out of Mania, the United States champion, because I don't think Owens beats Logan Paul for the belt either, and I don't think he should. And I like Kevin Owens, but I don't know. I feel like Logan and LA Knight to me feels like the WrestleMania-worthy match they already had in their plans, I would think. Don't know that officially. Before a couple of weeks ago, and plans might have changed, and they might have to come up with something new for both guys. But Logan Paul will probably be in the chamber, because again, if he doesn't qualify, then Kevin Owens won't qualify, which would mean both Miz and Dominic are in the chamber. I mean, you can't have a chamber match with Ivar, and I like these guys, but let's be real here. Ivar, Bronson, Dominic, and Miz. None of those guys are fucking winning. McIntyre and Orton are 2 top-tier stars. The other guys are not at that level. Not even Miz. They're not fucking winning. So that's the problem with these qualifiers, where I feel like all the bigger names that are involved are probably not going to win. And I don't want to complain and say, well, Bobby should be in there. No, I don't want Bobby in there, but it's like, I think Bronson makes the most sense out of everyone I just mentioned. The other guys take it or leave it. I think Owens and Logan Paul could be in there. Maybe they kind of factor each other out. I don't know. I don't really want that match at Mania. They should have a match on TV. But I don't know, man. It's a weird situation. But I thought overall SmackDown was a really, really good show. Stakes, and more stakes. Like I said, I like that. Meaningful matches. I appreciate that. We'll get more of that next week on Raw, next week on SmackDown with the men and women before Elimination Chamber in 2 weeks. So enjoyed SmackDown tonight, or last night rather. Really good stuff. We'll be back next week with another SmackDown review here on the channel. 2 weeks we will not be doing one. Obviously, Elimination Chamber is like the fucking morning of that Saturday in 2 weeks. So we're not reviewing SmackDown because the pay-per-view will be happening mere hours after SmackDown's over here in the States. So no SmackDown review. No, I mean, well, I don't even know if they're doing SmackDown Lowdown that day. Probably not. So I probably won't be doing that weekend either. But we will be back with the regular reviews, SmackDown Lowdown and SmackDown itself, here on the channel next weekend. So keep an eye out for that. Have an awesome one, guys. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.